Hi everyone, I've got a great chess encounter to bring you tonight. It's some crypto chess cup action. Now I'm looking at Pragg and Aronian against Aronian. You've got the experience of Levon versus the youth of Pragg. And Pragg's just having a great tournament so far. He's won all three of his matches to this date. Can he get past the seasoned vet Aronian? So the first two games of the match were drawn. The third one Pragg won. So this is the fourth and Levon is trying to win here. He's got the white pieces. Let's see what happened. So he kicks off here with c4, the English opening, and they repeat this line that they played in the second game or whatever it was. That one was a draw. So we have e5, knight c3, knight f6. Now this one comes to f3, and here we had e4 from Pragg, and I always thought this was quite a dubious move, not so great, because you kick the knight into g5, and because this pawn now protects the d5 push, you can't actually protect this pawn properly. If you go queen e7, there's queen c2. Anyway, the idea of black here is to give this pawn. So Pragg goes c6, Levon picks up the pawn, and after the knight's exchange, now he goes d5. So black's compensation for the pawn here is that you take the center, you kick this knight, and now black carries on gaining space, pawn to h5. This one's actually coming and trapping the knight because it's got nowhere to jump to, of course. So you either make room for it with e3, which is what Levon did, or you could do this one, but it's just not a good move essentially. Black's best here is a follow-up of bishop to g4, so now you can't go e3 for the time being. If you ever go f3, you're weakening dark squares, and this one could long-term be very weak, you know, bishop e7, that kind of thing. There's no knight on f3, and you'll never be able to castle kingside or anything, the rook's tied down, etc. So h4 no good. So e3 played, now we had h4, knight e2, knight c6 develops, d4, and now this is a really nice queen maneuver here, queen to f6. You know, this is the deep understanding of the position that these guys have. Simple idea, you want to transfer the queen to g6 as soon as this knight moves, so that then white can't harmoniously develop the bishop because the queen will be looking at the g2 pawn. So we had bishop d2 now from Levon, and by the way, the next few moves for white, you can kind of do them in any order it seems. You know, a3, rook c1, bishop d2, knight c3. I mean, these guys will know the deeper subtleties, of course. But after bishop d6 from Pragg, now we had a3, you can go rook c1 there, knight c3. Bishop f5 develops, rook c1, and Pragg castled his king actually in the earlier game before committing this queenside rook. But here he goes rook d8 already. Again, just a really deep move, you know, not putting it on the open c file. He doesn't want to trade pieces. So instead he's eyeing this pawn because later white's got this idea to win a second pawn here, as we'll see. So knight c3 targets it. Now queen g6, this is the one I mentioned, stops the bishop developing, and you can't take this pawn. You know, there's lots of tactics here for black in this position, because then you can go h3, threat to take here, and if g3, well, now there's bishop e4, you fork two pieces, black's completely winning. And coming back here, if you try queen f3, well, now we still have bishop e4 supported by the queen, so you have to be so careful as white. So the pawn wasn't taken, queen f3 instead, looks at this pawn, protects here, now h3 played, pawn g3 came, bishop g4 hits that queen, it's got no squares left except take here. Very brave looking move, but equally brave by black. You're two pawns down, so you really have to know what you're doing, and Pragg just calmly castles here. He knows this position. So queen b5 played, steps away from that open D line. Just coming back here, by the way, I guess there's maybe discoveries with the bishop at some point, but maybe there's probably a check on e4 and then getting the queens off. Didn't analyze that one, but yeah, it must be the check on e4, which is why you can't immediately move this bishop. So first we had castles, connect the rooks. Now there's queen b5, the black king is safe, and now rook f to e8. So you can see all the black pieces playing here, just blasting down at the white king, and you just really can't develop very harmoniously at all. So bishop e2 was played, but now we had knight takes on d4. So all very tactical stuff here. They're still in their preparation, both players. We had that knight being captured, looks very scary, opening the king, and now we had takes on e2, giving up a whole rook. You can't play in a faint-hearted manner in such a position, and now queen e4. So you threaten the rook, and you threaten mate if this queen ever moved. So if you castled the king, well, that would be a very bad idea. You get checkmated in one. If you tried to move the rook away from the attack, well, now black goes a6. And the queen's actually running out of squares. It's overloaded after b5. You can't come here, you get taken. You have to stay with the knight to stop the checkmate. If you come here, well, you get mated. So these are some of the problems. You can't save the rook in the corner. So bishop g5 was played here, but it actually kicks the rook to a better square. The best move was bishop e3 immediately, leaving that rook where it was. After bishop g5, rook e8, now bishop back to e3. Actually, Levon's helped Pragg, so he's the first one to misstep here, and now Pragg's got an advantage. So pawn a6 played, queen back to a4, and now pawn b5, nice move. Now the queen's no longer x-raying this rook. You give up a third pawn here as black. Have I counted that right? 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sorry, second pawn, okay. But still, you're a lot of material down. So Pragg really has to make something happen. And actually, technically, the best move here was queen to f3. I won't start getting into all the nuances here. Pragg played the more human-looking move. He took on h1 with check. The king moved up to d2. Now he comes back to f3. Again, threatening to take here, win a whole piece. And if you take this one here, well, this is actually a blunder, because another one of the recurring themes in this position is rook to b8, supported by the bishop, and then bang, you open up this second line of attack. The queen can't get back to defend that pawn. So this pawn's immune, basically. So queen f3 just played. Now we had rook e1 defending, and now here Pragg's got a tricky position. The position's technically level, even though black's 2 pawns down. There's plenty of compensation, but you have to tread so carefully. You know, tiny little subtle waiting moves like bishop c7, apparently the best move. But after rook e1, we had queen f6 from Pragg, and he's looking to actually transfer this queen, this kind of thing like this. But now Levon can go knight to c3, and after queen e6, well, now he goes queen c6. Excellent move, just stopping all of Pragg's threats dead, because now if you come down with something like queen b3, your rook's on prise. This is the problem. So rook c8 was played, had to deal with that threat, but now queen d5, just shutting out all the danger. Pragg's now backpedaling, so he goes b4 first. He's now threatening to take with check. So no time to swap the queens. A takes on b4 played. Now the queen came back to f6, but Levon is now 3 pawns up here, completely in the driving seat. And after pawn b5, bishop to b4, now Levon jumps over with the rook, invading down that new file. Its defensive job is done. We had the bishop coming to f3. Pragg's desperately trying to create some tricks here. Queen to b3 played. Hits the bishop, holds the knight some more, it drops back, and now the pawn gets marching. Bishop b7 covers, and here Levon was just completely winning if he could find something like rook to a7. It's just such a decisive invasion. I mean, how do you defend? You can go kind of queen e7, rook b8. If you move the bishop, this is a massive problem. So say rook b8, well, okay, white's just cruising now, d5, bishop d6, let's say, knight e4. I mean, yeah, I feel Levon would have won the position if he'd found rook to a7, but he doesn't find rook a7. He goes d5 first, and suddenly Pragg finds a square. Bishop c5, a sniff of counterplay against this bishop, and now rook e1 played, again just moving in the wrong direction, defensive mindset, and Aronian's just moving so fast. Look at the clock times, 8:45 to 30 seconds. And now after this one captured here with check, you can't go with the rook now, or Pragg takes here on f2 check, and then, okay, you're invading with the queen. Technically it's showing as a drawn position here, but Pragg would be happy with a draw. That's all he actually needed. So we didn't have takes with the rook, pawn recaptured. Now bishop a6 was played, excellent move, looking to dive into here or here, create some attacking threats. And now again, here Levon just missteps. So he goes queen c2 immediately here, perhaps anticipating queen f2 check. Then he can tuck back with king to d1, look to exchange queens. The rook still holds the pawn, this kind of thing. But after queen c2, he'd just overlooked that you can pick up a pawn on b6 here. Or maybe he hadn't overlooked it and thought that this was the best way to kind of consolidate and defend. But it's not so good, because now Pragg can really start attacking. So the king tucked back to c1. Now we had bishop c4, threat to come here. Also a threat to actually win this pawn, because after takes, the knight is actually pinned. And so we had rook d1 from Aronian here to protect this pawn, but this was a straight blunder. He should have played pawn to e4, because now we had bishop to b3, just skewering those pieces. And after the queen moved away, Pragg doesn't even pick up the rook immediately. Really nice play, queen to a5, and you just can't save the rook. If you go rook to d2, this is actually mate in 1, no knight b1 because of this pin. And say you go rook to d4, well again, this is just decisive, crashing through here, takes, queen check again, and this is actually mate on the back rank, using these pawns kind of like lapels on the king, really beautiful. So you can't save the rook. We had king d2 played, and now Pragg still crashes through, same motif, rook takes on c3. This was actually the final move of the game. Levon resigned. Why did he resign? If you capture with the pawn, similar kind of stuff going on with queen checks, but this time we come here, check from here, king moves, then you pick up the rook, and so on from here. This is decisive material advantage. You've got a bishop for a pawn, plus the king is still completely exposed. So Pragg is really on the march, level with Magnus Carlsen, who also won. Ali Reza beat Jan Krzysztof Duda as well, so I'll be covering some of Ali Reza's games as soon as I can. Obviously I love to cover his stuff on the channel, but I felt I just had to cover this Pragg one with what's just happened. You know, top of the tournament, exceptional play from him. Thanks very much for watching. I hope to see you again on a future video, and I'll see you soon. Cheers.